Well, let me ask another question to sort of back us up. We're looking, I mean, right now we're looking at those items down, so to speak, that haven't already received significant funding. When we look at the projects from there up, above the Town Elementary Kindergarten Edition, I mean, are those projects, and I guess really this question's more for you, Commissioner Howard, if you can answer it. When we look at projects number 1 through 3, from Westminster High HVAC down to Mount Airy Middle replacement, I mean, are those conversations we need to be having today in terms of the need for those? Or because those have already been, are projects that are well on their way, are we not really having this conversation about those? I guess what I'm asking is,
good question. Yeah.
Are those projects in jeopardy?
Commissioner Howard, if I could just add to that, maybe pinpoint a couple projects. Westminster HVAC, it's scheduled to be completed next December. We have received all of the state funding, at least recommendation at this point. That project is a turnkey operation that by December of next year we'll be done with. If the board is not, I mean, if that is really because of the 99% completion status of that project, I would assume to take that off the table for the board for their discussion today. And I know you can't speak because you haven't had those discussions with the commissioner, but I guess I'm asking for a reasonable.
Sure. Well, I can always speak. It may not mean anything, but I can always speak. My understanding of this spreadsheet is that those first two items, Westminster High HVAC and Hampstead HVAC replacement, there is no current CIP request. Those are existing projects.
Those are existing projects that have already moved forward. We have it on here for the sake of completion, but they're essentially done, right. And we don't see the need to go back and revisit those.
And I think the process that we went through, we just did this with our capital projects, the county's capital projects. We first of all recognize the same kind of thing. There are some projects that were so far along. Right. You know, at first we said, well, let's just hold off on everything until we can go through everything. And the notion was, well, if we're having a ribbon cutting tomorrow, do you hold off? Well, clearly you don't, and we started working our way back. So we ended up with certain categories which were complete or nearly complete, so far along that there would either be additional costs, potential loss of funding, or, you know, those types of things, or some real adverse effects to not finishing it. Then there were those that were sort of either maybe had the planning phase done, but weren't under construction, those types of things. Those we looked at, is that a delay? Is that we've shelved the plans for right now? Then there were those that were really very early on, and, you know, we recognized that some, you know, didn't need to be continued because, as you mentioned, Mr. Guthrie, it just changed of circumstance, change of priorities. Others, we said, you know, we really don't need to look at that. We've already had one that I think is probably going to come back that we've taken out. We're going to end up looking at as part of our 12 CIP anyhow. So I guess the long way around to say is I don't believe those shaded projects are at issue. Also down below, projects number 6, 9, 11, and 13 are being recommended. So it's not everything below.
There is one practical project on here that we're months away from starting construction on Mount Airy School replacement. That has been a discussion at our joint meeting. In fact, we're at the point where the school is ordering signs and you know, expending energy, and there's anticipation there. And I just want to clarify, from what I understand, that project is or is not being considered as a possible reduction.
We have not taken it up formally, but I can tell you that just based on my understanding is we are not all there yet. Okay. So I would say that if there's a discussion to be had, that case to be made, that's something that I think is going to come up as part of the discussion that we're having. Okay. And there's a logistic reason for that. I do have to inform the school and the staff, hey, I want you to hold up on ordering signs. I want you to, you know, we won't know this until the final budget is approved. Right. Well, and I think in consideration of those things, we can look also at the timing of when we're taking certain things up. Okay. And if that's sort of the most immediate concern in terms of how we schedule things, I think we could probably move that up in our discussion. Yeah, and I think that would be to our advantage and the community's advantage as well, because they were involved as we've discussed in the project.
So well, I believe you're looking at a June groundbreaking, and it's March 23rd. So, you know, Commissioner Howard, I think that would be a great idea because of the timeliness. Because honestly, at this point, I think the community is pretty invested in that project, and because you're only talking about something that's about 2 months away, you know,
we'll
that's
need to-
something that needs to be communicated.
And we can address any issues with that either today or at a future time to, as you said, accelerate the schedule on that decision.
Okay.
Thank
Well,
you.
we'll take that up with our agenda tomorrow and.
Looking at some of the other projects, numbers 3 and 4, you've addressed 1 and 2. Do we, need to have some discussion with regard to the roof replacement at Freedom Elementary and Charles Carroll Elementary heat plant? I mean, Ray, can you sort of provide us with some information about the necessity of each of those?
Well, yes. I mean, as I said, the roofing projects that we have in line here are situations where we could say the roofs have failed. So there's not much. I mean that's as blunt as I can be. We have video of how we're dealing with the water situations in the schools, but the schools deal with them. We don't hear a lot about it because they've learned to deal with them until they come up in the capital plan. The Charles Carroll heat plant, I think, has been discussed a number of times. It's an older, it's the oldest steam type system we have, and it needs to be upgraded.
Mr. Bauer?
Let the discussion continue. I'm fine with that. I was going to make a suggestion where we go and what we do here, or even make a motion. But I'll hold off until everybody gets through discussing the whole issue.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions? Mrs. Foley?
Mine is just a comment. I really am not inclined to do anything at this exact moment with any of our projects where we have the IAC approval and we have money committed to us from the state. That's a hard process to get the money. So if we've already got millions coming in, I'm not inclined to send it back to the state so that they can decide where else they want to disperse it. Because of how long it takes to get to that point, any one of these projects, if we take off and bring back later, I mean, the time frame and the fact that we've got this commitment already, I'm just not inclined at this exact moment, especially since the commissioners haven't made up their mind.
Mr. Progroff, would you mind speaking a little bit to the process for state funding for these projects? I mean, I guess in terms of what is the process and
Where are we now?
And what it means if we do, I guess, essentially leave money on the table. Do they give it to somebody else?
Yep.
Well, those are good questions. The process is nearing an end. There's only about 10% of state funds left to be allocated to the counties. So
Total amount is $250 million, so we're talking about $25 million about on the table yet to be distributed.
So they're finalizing what we believe will be some allocation to some of the projects where we still have some outstanding approval from the state. So at this point, we're waiting for those final dollars. We would be, our process, the state process, is essentially ending. We are then looking forward to moving forward with our procurement process, the design and whatnot, or the actual construction, depending on at which stage the projects are in. In terms of leaving money on the table is a kind of an iffy question. I can't say for sure whether that would go back, whether they would reallocate that money to other projects that they've approved for us, or whether that would go back into more of a general account. I'm not positive. There are remaining funds in the next fiscal year. We're asked where we would prefer to have those, but I'm not sure about returning money that's already been allocated.
Mrs. Shreve?
Well, I guess I was going to follow up on that, too, with what would happen to the money. And I guess I am looking at all of the projects that have been approved, or the money is in the budget at the county level, and we have received approval and money in the budget from the state, at the state level. At this point in time, I guess I would be kind of hard-pressed to send any of that money back. I'd love to see these projects move forward. I guess I'm okay. If the commissioners are looking for some sense from the Board of Education as to take a relook at these projects, I guess I would have to look at Tawny Town and possibly, be okay with eliminating that project from the process at this point. But anything above that on this list, I feel really uncomfortable right now.
Well, if I could interject also, there is one area in here that we haven't hit on at all because we're focusing on school construction projects, but technology improvements.
I guess I want to focus just real quickly on the Mount Airy Replacement School because that is, I think, the biggest project on this plan right now.
Yeah.
And in our work session that we had a couple weeks ago with the commissioners, I sort of got a sense from the conversation at the table that they were hoping that the board might consider looking at delaying that project, if even for a year, to maybe go back and see if there was anything that we could do to scale back on that project, be a little more efficient. And I think at that time we had discussion about if we did wait a year to do that or look at this project, we would be in jeopardy of losing the state dollars.
Correct.
I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit, because that would concern me, because we'd have to start back at the beginning of the process again to try to get state funding, and we may or may not get it. And that being said, if we would not get it for some reason, then the school is gone, and we have an issue down in that area of the county with the number of elementary students that are going to be coming in. We would have to do something to that school with an addition or something. And to me, an addition, this is what led to the new school. An addition on that building would
Not be eligible for state funding.
would not be eligible for state funding. And also, in order to put an addition to that building, you can't really do that without modernizing some aspect of the existing building. So I don't know if you could speak to that a little bit as far
I
as
certainly
the funding
can.
going away, or
The nature of this project, board members, as you recall, it did start as an addition because of the capacity issues there. We use local capacity at that school. In other words, it is a number that causes a school to be more overcrowded than the state number. And we do that because of the teaming concept that we have. So when we first looked at it as an addition, it was really a tack on. It satisfied some need to continue growth in that area. But one of the things we discovered as we went through it is because it's a different state calculation on capacity, it is not eligible for state reimbursement. The project then moved down the line to a modernization, which the state would participate in, and then through a scope study, it just determined that it's more cost effective, since 75% of the school would have to be demolished to adhere to current building and standards and specifications. We came up with the replacement scenario, given the fact that there was room on the site. Now, so we went through the process of changing that very specifically, and it mirrors what you're asking. When we changed that from a replacement building or from a modernization to replacement building, we had to go back to the state. Now, luckily, we were early enough that we weren't far down the design road. But now that we are down the design road and we have the construction documents approved and submitted to the state, we are at the point that any changes in design would cause us to have to resubmit back to the beginning. And so it would be impossible, I believe, and Ray certainly correct me if I'm wrong, at this late stage to say to the funding authorities at the state level, we'd have a redesign.
If we were to have any sort of I don't want to say dramatic or drastic redesign, but to some level there would be that we'd have to pull back. And given that we're only weeks away from putting the documents out on the street for bidding, there's no question that any sort of tweaking to that would delay the project. We'd have to wait. We'd be at this time next year in terms of any sort of redesign. Our documents are prepared. They're ready to go out. So any sort of major change like that would be quite an impact. In terms of what the state would do at that point, I guess it becomes another question mark, because they've got to reevaluate the way what it is now, and how that, to make sure that it fits within their constraints and their parameters. So we'd be back to an evaluation on their part. There would also, I'm sure, be questions about the commitment and why we're jumping back and forth with it.